McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop, Season 2, Episode 20. The 24-Hour Death. October 10th, 1921. Continued. I felt my whole body seize up. I'm surprised my skin didn't shrivel up like a raisin. I couldn't look away from the frightful-looking little man, because part of me felt as though he wasn't real. He was made of wax, surely, and he would melt before my eyes sooner than he would speak and prove himself to be a normal human. But he wasn't wax. He was real. He was a real person with dull, moist eyes that looked like glass inside their sockets. His skin was puffed and taut and a little yellowed. He looked like a corpse that had started to go south for the winter. Nothing about him looked real. Even his hair looked like it was made of flax. "Mr. Muntz," Noble said. "My name is Noble James. Do you remember me?" "No," Mr. Muntz said. "I do not." "Well, I've come here twice before," Noble said. "And I've brought a friend this time. And we'd both like to pay for your service." Mr. Muntz snorted. "Come inside," he said. He spoke English well, with only a slight accent. He held open the door. Noble went into the back room first, and I followed. My stomach sloshed as soon as we stepped inside. The smell wasn't good. I've never smelled the flesh of dried-up lizards, but I imagined it smelled something like this. Or maybe I was smelling the dried snake skin that was pinned to the wall. The walls were black, the curtains were black, and the skulls of dead things lined shelves all around the room. It wasn't beautiful or neatly arranged, either. It was a haphazard mess of decay. I thought about what Noble had said, about how Muntz acted like a charlatan. Here were all the gimmicks and tricks of his trade, the haunt and the spectacle. They didn't make me feel any easier about what we were about to undergo. "Sit," Mr. Muntz said. "You have money?" We did not sit. The chairs also seemed to be in a state of decay. Noble pulled out his wallet and handed Mr. Muntz quite a bit of money. He didn't seem to care about the money being foreign. He took it and seemed satisfied, and that's when I realized that Noble had paid for me as well. For a split second, I felt like a girl on a date, being paid for by her suitor, and it made me feel awkward. I wanted to pay Noble back. It was almost more intimate, more suggestive, because of the secrecy of what we were doing. "I'll pay you back," I said to Noble. "When you can," he said. "No rush." Mr. Muntz began to rifle through a pile of black stones on the mantel. He picked one up and eyed it. He clearly didn't know we were magic unusuals. He seemed to be preparing his charlatan act, his fake show of magic. "You must sit," he said to me. So I sat. I took a look at the chair before making contact with it, however. It was black and threadbare, with a brown stain in the center. On closer inspection, the brown stain was just the material wearing away, and despite looking dreadful, the glossy black upholstery was clean. When I sat, however, it didn't feel clean. I felt like the darkness of the chair was going to cover me like soot. It was all in my head, but it made me feel dirty. "I shall begin," Mr. Muntz said. I got the feeling that he was going to do this to me, whether I wanted it or not, now that he'd been paid. "What part of us dies?" I said to Noble. He seemed to sense that I was nervous, and he stepped closer. It made me feel better, having a friend nearby. "Empathy," Noble said. It's more complex than that, but that's most of what gets taken away." "Empathy?" I said. "Our ability to feel for others, for the world, and, more importantly, for ourselves. Murdering our empathy dulls the pain. We stop caring. We stop seeing people as human glories, and instead we start to see them as human refuse. We no longer revere, we disdain. It hurts too much to care. The night enthusiasts remove their empathy. This procedure removes empathy as well." I thought of Ariana. Her selfishness made a bit more sense now. So I won't care about anyone, I said. For 24 hours? Oh, you'll still care, Noble said, just not as much. The soul murder dulls you. It inhibits empathy. It doesn't completely remove it. You'll feel cranky. I smiled. He smiled back. Mr. Muntz gave us a glare. I sensed that he was used to another kind of customer, one that wanted spectacle and creep. We were disrupting the spectacle and creep. Mr. Muntz began to mutter nonsense words under his breath in a wild voice, and I rolled my eyes. I gripped the edge of the chair and waited for it to be over. Then all of a sudden it was. He was still in the middle of his spiel, his charade, but I'd felt that little bit of my soul leave me. I felt light. The stress and anxiety of 100 different colors had faded to grey. My soul was bleached, chalky. I was removed from myself, and I suddenly realized how exhausted I was. It didn't feel good. Not quite. I didn't feel a rush of joy, a rich pleasure, a connection to the world around me. I'd lost my ability to feel those things. I'd lost my ability to feel. And that was what was wonderful. The pain stopped. The pain, I guess you might say, of loving people. I felt the weight of the Great War. My parents' death, Ariana's betrayal, my loneliness, all leave me. I was empty inside. My grief no longer hurt, because I no longer felt it. Mr. Muntz finished his act, and I stood up, like someone in a dream. Noble sat down and underwent the same procedure. I looked around the room, feeling strangely disconnected from myself. All I could think was what a relief it was. I had been so stupid before, so blind, so childish. This was the best way. This was the only way to live your life and still get things done. This was the only way to get through life in one piece. Of course, I realized how ridiculous that thought was as soon as I had it. I couldn't exactly get through life in one piece if I wasn't in one piece to begin with. But this way, this partially damaged way, would prevent future damage. It was perfect. Mr. Muntz finished with Noble, and then he clunked down the skunk skull he'd been using in his fake ritual. "All right, you're finished. Get out," he said. Noble stood up, and he hurried out of the back room without waiting for me. I followed. We stood side by side in the shop front. Noble was different. He seemed skeptical, unsure of me. He bristled a little bit, and I bristled a little bit, and we stood and regarded each other for a moment. "It will pass," he said. "I feel like I've got a hangover," I said, "like I'm ready to snap at everyone for no good reason." "We should go to the secret entrance," he said. "Yes," I said. We glanced at each other, and then we teleported. We arrived right outside the Night Enthusiast's secret entrance, in the backyard of the cafe. The only trouble was, the place was a madhouse. People shouted on the street. I heard footsteps dashing about inside the cafe. Boys were running and calling on the other side of the fence. Noble and I had only been gone for about 10 minutes. Melinda Merkel, the murderess, had been spotted here 10 minutes before. Now everyone was trying to find her. Trying to find me. As long as Noble and I could rush down into the secret passage before we were spotted, we'd be all right. If we were spotted, however, things would get difficult. The person would probably keep staring at us, never take their eyes off us. We wouldn't be able to teleport, and I doubted the secret entrance would let us enter when a non-magic unusual was watching. Noble opened the door and dashed into the secret passage. So far so good. But then, before I had a chance, a girl behind me screamed. We hope you've enjoyed Season 2, Episode 20, The 24-Hour Death of McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop is written and performed by Minerva Sweeney Wren, all rights reserved. If you wish you were a magic unusual, fear not. When you subscribe to or review this podcast, you perform a magical deed by making it far more attractive to potential listeners. You can also gain magical powers by becoming a $1 patron at patreon.com/SweeneyWren. Results are not guaranteed. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop will continue with Season 2, Episode 21. Their Rust and Let Me Die.